In 1999, mankind was hurtling towards disaster. The upcoming Y2K bug was looming large. The first tech bubble was about to pop. And Star Wars was about to show us what happens when lofty expectations turn into collective disappointment.
I knew it.
It had happened before, but that was before people had access to the internet.
You assume too much.
Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. From the very start, George Lucas had maintained that the original Star Wars was one part of a larger story that he'd wanted to tell, but only had the resources to tell a small section. If he did have the resources to make his entire story in 1977, it would have been 18 hours long with only one intermission midway through, which really would have put a strain on the theatre's toilet facilities. Oh, son of a bitch, be right back. George Lucas generally hated the physical grind of being a director, which is why after the first Star Wars film, he delegated directorial duties to others while he concentrated on the writing and production side of things. The original Star Wars trilogy was wrapped in 1983 with Return of the Jedi, and by this time, Lucas was spent. He just wanted to focus on his young family. Without new Star Wars films in development, interest in the franchise among the bulk of moviegoers and more casual fans waned, like a moon having a really bad month.
But Master Yoda said I should be mindful of the future.
But not at the expense of the moment. Be mindful of the living force, young Padawan.
In the 80s and 90s, fans had the extended universe books and comics and video games that filled in the blanks, which basically meant every minor or peripheral character featured in a Star Wars movie was somehow also the leader of their planet. Lucas wasn't totally sitting on his hands. He'd been frustrated by the relatively primitive tools available to filmmakers and had started up a number of companies under his Lucasfilm banner to research new technologies for filmmaking. Ooh, la-di-da! I'm researching digital filmmaking, aren't I precious? 35mm film, stop-motion optical printing and blue screen not good enough for me. Or so the purists might say in a mocking tone. In the late 70s, early CG pioneers III put together a demo of computer-generated X-Wing fighters, but the costs at the time would have been prohibitive, like trying to license Mickey Mouse for your high school production of Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap.
The situation has become much more complicated.
The Lucas company ILM did some tinkering with computer graphics, but Lucas also invested in a company to create computer animation, Pixar, but sold it off cheaply to Steve Jobs to raise cash. There was Lucasfilm Games, later renamed to LucasArts, who would make any number of highly regarded original games before later being limited to mainly developing, publishing and micromanaging Star Wars titles. Lucas also invested in the creation of digital audio tools as well as digital video editing systems such as the Edit Droid. The latter tech was later sold to Avid. George Lucas was also interested in improving the experience of actually watching the movie, where he founded the company THX, whose logo would blow out eardrums the world over whenever somebody wanted to show off their latest home theater system. But George Lucas wasn't making films. Lucas had already used computer graphics and compositing to enhance his early 90s projects Young Indiana Jones and the feature Radioland Murders, when his effects house ILM had a massive breakthrough with the creation of realistic CG dinosaurs for Steven Spielberg's 1993 film Jurassic Park. It finally looked as though the things that Lucas could imagine could be rendered convincingly on screen. He began work on a script for a new trilogy in the mid-90s. Finally, at last, after all of the blood, sweat and tears, finally we could have a photorealistic digital character. Unfortunately, it was Jar Jar Binks. But back up a bit. With ILM's newfound digital skill, Lucas set to work, taking the original trilogy, cleaning the films up, lovingly restoring them and remastering them for optimum picture quality and audio, and then ruined them by pasting in gratuitous and unnecessary CG scenes, partly as a test of the tech and partly for shits and giggles. It was also a portent of the future. Fans lapped up these new versions of the films while at the same time complained about the changes, whether it be musical changes, digital characters, or Han Solo no longer shooting first. The remastered films were released in cinemas in 1997 and became hits all over again, reigniting people's interest in Star Wars. The same as pouring a couple of litres of kerosene on a barbecue. Lucas had proved the tech was there to make the Star Wars films that he saw in his head, and so production began on a new trilogy, a prequel trilogy. He may as well have poured the kerosene on the master negatives of the original trilogy. The hit to his reputation for the next 15 years would have been about the same.
You
You mightn't be saying that.
The first film in the trilogy was prepped for release in 1999 as Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace. Lucas called the film The Phantom Menace in part as a way to harken back to the pulp sci-fi novels and theatrical serials that originally influenced the creation of Star Wars. Expectations were high, people were hyped beyond belief, and as YouTube and Twitter didn't exist, it took a while for the collective disappointment to turn to absolute hatred.
Hello, I am C-3PO Human Cyborg Relations. How might I serve you?
He's perfect.
Oh?
I was never as down on the film as many people I knew at the time of the film's release. Not because I'm in any way superior, but because A, I'd seen the special editions and saw where Lucas's mind was at, and B, even as a child, I thought Return of the Jedi just wasn't as good as the first two films. The Phantom Menace was at best and at worst average, reasonably entertaining, highly flawed, but for most people, watchable. However, if you lived, breathed, and farted Star Wars, Phantom Menace was a rude shock. Like waking up in your bed to find a basset hound licking your face, and what's worse, you don't have a dog.
No, not really, no.
So let's look at the film itself.
This is not a good idea.
It's about 30 or so years before the events we saw in 1977's Star Wars Episode IV. The Galactic Republic is still around, but bureaucracy has run amok. The Trade Federation has its knickers in a twist over tax, and they decide to blockade the planet Naboo. Obviously, there's no equivalent of the Cayman Islands in this galaxy. Naboo is run by the 14-year-old elected Queen Amidala. No offense to the Queen, if you're 15 or older, speak to a random 14-year-old and tell me electing somebody 14 years old is a smart move. Queen Amidala, played mostly by Natalie Portman, I'll explain later, calls for Republic help and is sent one of the most bumbling Jedi Knights in the entire saga, Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, who turns up along with his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi. By the time you get to the end of Episode 1, you'll realise what an incompetent idiot Qui-Gon is.
This Gungan may be of help.
He's confident and projects an air of authority, but with absolutely nothing to back it up, since his every instinct and decision will cause untold pain and misery across the galaxy for decades to come. Qui-Gon is the Neville Chamberlain of the Star Wars universe. He's a schmuck. Things don't go so well, and the pair escape to Naboo, where they meet Jar Jar Binks. What can you say about Jar Jar Binks in that maybe he's so stupid as to make Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan seem less idiotic? That is a very low bar, so Jar Jar also has a silly voice.
When are you thinking we in trouble?
Would Jar Jar have been any less annoying if he'd had a different voice?
You can't handle the truth!
Buongiorno.
Shall we shag now or shall we shag later?
I don't know.
Jar Jar is well done technically for the time, but his total lack of any usefulness outside of comic bumbling is about as endearing as extreme food poisoning.
Anakin Skywalker, meet Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Hi. You're a Jedi too? Pleased to meet you.
Obi-Wan himself doesn't really do all that much for most of the film. As Qui-Gon's Padawan, he's just along for the ride as he's training to be a Jedi Knight. It was either that or get his real estate license.
I have a bad feeling about this.
I don't sense anything.
Well, no shit, Sherlock.
I'm ambassador to the Supreme Chancellor. I'm taking these people to Coruscant.
Coruscant, that doesn't compute. Wait, you're under arrest.
Again, things don't go so well, and Qui-Gon and company escape from Naboo with Amidala and her entourage and have to land on Tatooine to make repairs. The makers of Star Wars sure love Tatooine due to its tax rebate put in by the Hutts in return for product placement within the film. Tatooine. It's a dry heat. All of this intrigue is orchestrated by a hooded figure we know as Darth Sidious, but really it's this guy, Senator Palpatine. We know because they're the same actor, Ian McDiarmid. Darth Sidious is a Sith Lord, and as the film tells us many times, there are always two.
This is my apprentice, Darth Maul.
We'll talk about Palpatine's motives and schemes for taking over the Republic when we talk about the later films.
I will be Chancellor.
But this is a prequel trilogy that's designed in a way to make the most annoying person in the theatre realise out loud,
"Oh, so he's the Emperor. Oh, so that's Darth Vader. Shh. Oh, so he made C-3PO too. Shh. Oh, and she's Princess Leia's mama.
Quiet, please.
Oh, so that's what R2 does.
Will you shut the f*** up?" On Tatooine, they cross paths with a young slave boy.
I I'm a person, and my name is Anakin.
Ooh, already with the grouchy stuff, Annie. Better watch that. That temper could turn nasty as you get older. Anakin is a mechanical genius and has cobbled together a protocol droid, C-3PO.
I don't believe we have been introduced.
Oh, so that's where they met.
But his real skill is that he's apparently the only human with fast enough reflexes to race pods. Almost like a Jedi, which apparently he might be because he has a very high midichlorian count.
Even Master Yoda doesn't have a midichlorian count that high.
Qui-Gon and Shmi have an awkward conversation about the identity of Anakin's baby daddy.
There was no father.
So very quickly, Anakin races pods but has never finished a race. Qui-Gon needs to pay for expensive parts to repair the ship and wagers with junk trader Watto that Anakin will win the race. It's touch and go, but Anakin, of course, wins the pod race.
I lost everything.
For a long time, people consoled themselves that at least this film had the pod race as a cool scene. You gotta take it where you can get it, I suppose. Qui-Gon has also managed to secure Anakin's freedom, but not his mum's. Why? Because Qui-Gon did not for 1 minute believe that Immaculate Conception bullshit. After making repairs and escaping from Sidious's apprentice Darth Maul, the ship lands on the galactic capital Coruscant, so that Amidala can make a speech in the Senate.
Honorable representatives of the Republic.
The Jedi test Anakin by having him outline all the places he's gone number 2 in the last 24 hours.
A cup. A ship. A speeder.
Evaluated by the Jedi Council for training as a Jedi, Anakin is rejected because he doesn't meet the height requirement or the age requirement, and because his psych evaluation shows him to be a probable mass murderer. Things don't go so well, and so they all return to Naboo. Even though he can't train him, Qui-Gon brings the kid with him into a war zone. On Naboo, they seek out the Gungans because nothing by this stage has led them to believe the Gungans are in any way dull-witted or useless. Then the film pulls its most amazing twist.
I am Queen Amidala.
Padme, the Queen's handmaiden, was actually Amidala all along. So this is Natalie Portman, and this is the decoy played by Keira Knightley. Portman, Knightley, Knightley, Portman, Portman, Knightley. It's an interesting way to get around the criticism that Star Wars films only ever had one major speaking role for a female character. There does seem to be some tension there.
Padme.
Whenever the decoy queen is on the throne, she gives the real queen, as Padme,
Clean this droid up as best you can.
the really dirty jobs like cleaning down R2-D2.
Maybe we saw being friends.
The Naboo and the Gungans team up to take on the massive droid army in a plan that seems to rely on the element of luck.
The Gungans must draw the droid army away from the cities.
I mean, it is led by the newly promoted General Jar Jar.
Many Gungans will be killed.
It's clearly a plan with very little downside for Amidala. Darth Maul turns up and so the Jedi face him. OMFG, did you see that? His lightsaber has 2 blades, shit just got real. Anakin finds cover in the cockpit of an armed starfighter for safekeeping, because Qui-Gon's only just now realised having a child follow him into a battle zone might be a little dangerous.
Oops, wrong one.
Somehow Anakin launches the starfighter and manages to wipe out the droid army control vessel, rendering them useless. A bit like a supermarket checkout when the computers are down. Qui-Gon Jinn, the Jedi Master, leans into his finely honed instincts while battling Darth Maul. Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace is a relatively simple story told in an okay way. It really could have used somebody other than George Lucas to take a pass at the dialogue.
No need to report that to him until we have something to report.
It tells the story reasonably clearly, but it's just that little bit clunky and chunky, like making mashed potato without much actual mashing. Some of the dialogue just rolls off the tongue like a Technicolor yawn. For whatever reason, people at Lucasfilm probably didn't feel too comfortable in telling their boss that his script needed just a little bit of work.
It's not disrespect, Master, it's the truth.
From your point of view,
The performances are a mite stiff from people who are usually much more dynamic elsewhere.
I don't think so. No one can kill a Jedi.
George Lucas, having financed the film and hating the actual directing part of the movie-making process, wanted that over and done with as quickly as possible. There are basically 2 ways for directors to handle actors. Some actors prefer a director just yell action and let them do their thing, but many, if not a majority, want direction. That's generally very important with younger actors and vital in a film where actors are standing in front of a blue or green screen, reacting to a character who will be created in a computer in a year's time.
Pity hot.
Lucas is famous for only giving feedback like faster, more intense. That goes some way to explain why actors who normally give a good performance elsewhere seem oddly flat in the prequel movies. Ewan McGregor is one of the few leads in this film that doesn't seem to come across as a block of wood. Natalie Portman gave good performances as a young actor, yet her scenes as Padme seem to be rather stiff and deadpan, like Mr. Spock on open mic night. Her turn as the Queen, however, was suitably regal. Jake Lloyd might have done better with a director who knew how to elicit a performance from a child actor, but what's done is done, and he only appears in this one film.
Are you an angel?
However, it's Ahmed Best who drew the shortest straw. He was on set in a boiling hot Jar Jar Binks suit when the original idea was to digitally composite a CG head onto Best's body. But ILM found it was actually cheaper and quicker to do the whole character in the computer and have Best record the dialogue.
You said people gonna die?
Jar Jar became a symbol of everything wrong with Star Wars at this time and brought out everything wrong with Star Wars fans.
Gonna be messy. We not watching.
Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon is somewhere in the middle. He's saddled with a lot of exposition, justifying his character's poor decisions, ghosting Shmi Skywalker, and with all of that he has to try to bring some truth to the role. Like a doctor telling Mr. and Mrs. Mario that while their son Luigi will be able to jump further than his brother, he's going to have poorer overall coordination.
Credits will do fine.
No, they won't. What, you think you're some kind of Jedi waving your hand around like that?
Samuel L. Jackson wanted desperately to appear in the film in any small role since he was such a huge Star Wars fan. Mace Windu was a relatively small role that would become a major character in the next two prequels.
Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
Having Yoda back was a bonus, still voiced by Frank Oz. In the original release, a puppet was used, but looked worse than the puppet from The Empire Strikes Back and was replaced with the digital version for subsequent releases. Yes, George Lucas wouldn't stop tinkering with his films until he sold the franchise lock, stock and barrel to Disney years later. Brian Blessed provided the voice of Boss Nass.
Be gone with him!
Peter Serafinowicz gave us the voice of Darth Maul.
At last we will have revenge.
While stuntman Ray Park gave the character the requisite sneer. Pernilla Augusta Shmi Skywalker.
What does your heart tell you?
Hugh Corsi as Captain Panaka seems to give us constant updates on the status of the Trade Federation's business.
The Senate would revoke their trade franchise and they'd be finished. I think you can kiss your trade franchise goodbye.
Terrence Stamp appears briefly as the soon-to-be-deposed Galactic Chancellor, and Ian McDiarmid, one of the few actors to appear in all three trilogies, manages to make Sidious and Senator Palpatine not seem like cartoons, which unfortunately is exactly what the character would become in later films. Also, for laughs, there's editor and sound designer Ben Burt, and the film's producer Rick McCallum, and also in a cameo, Sofia Coppola as one of the Queen's handmaidens. Apparently, Winona Ryder was busy.
Not likely.
I heard Yoda talking about midichlorians. I've been wondering, what are midichlorians?
One of the things that was strongly objected to at the time was a more scientific explanation of the Force, and of course, the midichlorians. It's a shame that a made-up religion had to try and have a made-up scientific explanation. I object to the after-school special level dialogue and acting in this scene more than anything else.
Without the midichlorians, life could not exist. It is possible he was conceived by the midichlorians.
The film made great strides in the creation of digital effects, though there's still a fair amount of model work used. While Jar Jar and Watto were fully CG, some of the other dated ethnic stereotypes were actors in animatronic masks. The battle droids were mostly digital creations. They're meant to be relatively fearsome, yet somehow at the same time come across as utterly useless and incompetent.
Check it out, Corporal. We'll cover you.
Roger, roger.
I'm just waiting for a consortium of battle droids to buy Yahoo. John Williams was back and delivered one of his finest scores. Duel of the Fates underscores the climactic lightsaber battle at the end of the film. And there are subtle hints of themes he would use in the original trilogy. The Phantom Menace's plot was fairly simple, like Tetris, but everything's the square. The film's focus is in world building, which is done well, and set up for a trilogy, which is not. That and it's a delivery mechanism for jokes about characters stepping in shit, which seems the most apt metaphor you could imagine. The Phantom Menace showed actual Jedi in their prime. They fight far more energetically than we'd seen so far, but they're also let down somewhat by their arrogance.
Credits will do fine.
No, they won't!
What's good about The Phantom Menace? It had pretty good production design. There's an attempt to show that this is the world of the Republic before the brutalist design of the Empire. There are little design hints in places that this is an early version of Imperial technology in terms of ships and weapons. The score and sound design are some of the best from the 1990s. And Darth Maul, intended as a one-off villain, was too cool to be killed off so quickly. Of course, unlike his legs, his death wouldn't stick.
Hands up.
I give up. I give up.
The film was a massive coming together of talented people in front of and behind the scenes, labouring on a script they could have done with a polish by somebody other than their boss.
Roger, roger.
There's dialogue that works, but a lot that doesn't.
You're a pilot?
Mm-hmm. All my life.
Lumbering a child actor with important exposition and then not taking the time to get the scene right before moving on really hurts the film. And then there's the really bad ideas that just compound themselves, like feeding a ninja baked beans before a stealth mission. Is The Phantom Menace's main problem chunky plotting, hackneyed dialogue, stilted acting, or too much goofiness? It's a bit like pointing out which lightning bolt to avoid during a storm. The answer is all of the above.
I don't want this stunted slime in my sight again.
There are also the convenient coincidences that may be made for easier storytelling, but just create more problems down the line. Prequels are often a vehicle for filling in characters' backstories, but they also have a distressing habit of just creating more continuity problems. It's silly things like having R2-D2 owned by Luke's mother and C-3PO built by Darth Vader, Ben Kenobi later having no memory of either droid, and well, I'm sure there are several actually comments listing where things don't tally up with the original trilogy. But honestly, minor continuity issues are not the film's biggest problems. Also, who at Lucasfilm was realistically going to point out to George Lucas that he was contradicting himself?
You're a slave?
The first teaser for the film was amazing. In the days before broadband internet took off, people paid money to see a movie like Meet Joe Black just to watch the trailer for The Phantom Menace. That first teaser was great and got people excited. But anybody who'd forgotten the changes made in the special editions was in for a rude shock, like getting into a jacuzzi with a stripper holding a car battery.
How rude.
The release of The Phantom Menace was a big event, and fans who'd been starved for new Star Wars films lapped it up, or more accurately, hate-lapped it up. It was the box office champ of the year, but it did not come anywhere close to the levels of the original trilogy.
Look at all the money we have.
The hype machine that year was phenomenal, but even as a Star Wars fan, the amount of tie-ins was cringeworthy.
How rude.
As someone who likes a lot of different things, a mediocre Star Wars film was just that. I'd still prefer to watch an ordinary Star Wars film over a brilliant Lord of the Rings film, mainly because Star Wars was one of my main jams, strawberry, one that you could have with scones or pikelets. But the weight of expectation, hoping George Lucas would be able to deliver something that would match The Empire Strikes Back, and then didn't, probably killed a lot of people's love for the series.
That much is clear.
Angry fans wrote lengthy reviews. Angry fans didn't buy the mountain of merchandise.
What the hell am I gonna do with all of this crap?
Some angry fans made fan edits removing Jar Jar.
Jar Jar Binks. Yes.
Each release saw George Lucas tweak the images more and more. While Lucas had wanted to make the film completely digitally, the tech wasn't quite ready for principal photography, but a few tests recorded digitally during reshoots made it into the finished film. George Lucas really wanted to push the envelope of what was possible with film technology. The Phantom Menace has had a massive reappraisal over the years.
It sounds like bait.
It went from being the most hated film ever, at least in terms of Star Wars films, to something that many people unironically liked for more than just the pod race. Call me crazy, but they're crazy. It's not as terrible as it was once made out to be, but it's not as good as some people would now make it out to be. I get it, familiarity has taken some of the sting away.
Now this is pod racing.
There was always going to be a schism between those who grew up with the original trilogy and those that grew up with the prequel trilogy as their main.
Oh, funny business.
Next up, George Lucas would continue to fill in Darth Vader's backstory in what was almost completely made in the digital realm.
And you, young Skywalker, we will watch your career with great interest.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
We shall make you Bombard General.
General?
You son of a bitch.